Can the Justice League recover from one of the most horrific acts ever committed to them? Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. This is a classic Justice League storyline. I don't believe it's in continuity anymore, as half of these characters don't even exist currently, so just enjoy the story for what it is. It was a quiet night in Opal City as Ralph Digby, aka the Elongated Man, and Lorraine Riley, aka Firehawk, stake out a couple of street thugs during their sale of something. Ralph has a feeling that it has something to do with a villain, mainly because that whenever there's a mystery, his nose twitches. Lorraine tells him that she met Green Arrow once and he said that the nose thing was a lie, just to get more press. He turns and he stares at her, and after a few moments of silence, he tells her, Green Arrow has a bald spot, that's why he wears a hat. Another 10 minutes pass and all is quiet, so Lorraine asks how he met his wife. She heard that he crashed her ball or something and it was love at first sight, and he tells her that it really was. When they met, they were basically kids, but at that party, she noticed him and not anyone else. Since then, they've always been together. She was his lady. And then she asks if it's really true, her doing mysteries for his birthday thing. He tells her yes, every year Sue sets up a mystery to try and surprise him. Last year, she had the Flash dress up as an old man, and this year it's going to be Green Arrow. He acts surprised, but the League didn't hire him because he can stretch. His detective skills have always come first. And who is he to ruin all of her hard work? So a little more time passes and Lorraine asks if he's worried, having his secret identity out there for years now. And Ralph stops her, stating, because Sue's a target, I know. That's why she stayed at the Justice League embassy for so many years, but now we have so much security in our apartment that I feel like she's safe. The two of them then go back to keeping watch, and just as the thug's buyer arrives, Ralph gets a call from Sue asking, please, are you there? Ralph assumes the worst and he tells Lorraine to fly him home, and when he finds his apartment, the sprinklers are on. He runs inside and he doesn't see Sue, and then he does. And next to her charred body is his birthday present. She was pregnant. The next day, Ollie heads over to the apartment along with other heroes to try and find some clue as to who could have done this. Someone set fire to the apartment, and Sue died from the smoke and the fire. And as he watches the team work, he begins to think how killing a cop is one thing. But Sue, she was a part of them, the heroes, and whoever did this better pray that the cops find them before the heroes do. A few days later, Ralph has a service for Sue, when the problem with everyone knowing his secret identity is that everyone comes. For Sue, though, she wasn't just a superhero's wife. She was an honorary member of the League. Even Lois Lane wasn't that. Diana stands before the crowd giving Sue's eulogy, and afterwards, Ralph tries to speak, but with the loss of his love, he can't get any words out. Once the services are done, the League begins to break off into teams to try and figure out who did this, everyone assuming that they know who it might be. And that leaves Green Arrow, Hawkman, Atom, Black Canary, and Zatanna all behind. Under normal circumstances, it would be nice to have this old group back together, but them all together reminds them of the things that they've done, and to this day it's still a secret. All five of them head back to find Ralph in private, and he tells them that they all know who did this. They never put this into the League archives. The look of despair quickly fades from his face, and then he turns, and they can see the look of destruction as he tells them, you have to help me find Dr. Light. Through the silence, Hawkman stops and calls out, stop right there. The group doesn't say anything at first, but then they see him. Wally. Ollie then adds, I see you too, Kyle. And then Kyle appears asking, how did you know? And Ollie responds with, I didn't. I was just bluffing. Wally and Kyle begin to inquire what they're talking about, and Ollie just says it's a lead. But Wally asks, really? Then why don't you ask Clark, or better yet, Bruce? So Ollie tells Ralph to go ahead and tell him. The boys are grown up now, and this one, they need to hear. You see, there was a night after a battle with Dr. Light, and Sue was up in the Watchtower satellite. Everyone else was planetside. Dr. Light came to the Watchtower to take what they assumed was his light gun that they were keeping in the trophy room. But when he got there, he saw Sue, and he decided to take something else. He began ripping off parts of her clothing, and then it happened. Barry Allen was the first one to get back, and then the rest of them showed up. But by the time they had stopped Dr. Light, the damage had been done. Later, as the group stood on the rooftops, Wally says that he can't believe it. He's fought Dr. Light dozens of times, and he always was, and Ollie finishes it, a moron, right? Yeah, well, he wasn't always like that. Wally asks what he means, and Ralph says that they thought that they turned him in. So Wally continues the story. While all of them, alone with Barry and Hal, decided what they were going to do next, Dr. Light kept shouting that he would find her again. It would be easy. And the look in his eyes, no one had ever seen that before. Not even in Arkham Asylum. So Zatanna made him forget the incident. And then Hawkman asked if it was going to be enough. If they let him go, he could go after Carol, or Jean, or even Dinah. Hawkman then suggests that maybe they can have Zatanna clean him up a bit. Out of the 7, sides quickly formed. Some wanted to brainwash Dr. Light, and others were against it, which left them with the last person, Barry Allen. Wally says that there's no way Barry would go for it, but the truth was, he was all for brainwashing Dr. Light. What they did was basically magically lobotomize him. Making him forget something is one thing, but they shifted his personality, even slightly. Kyle calls them all insane, all of them, but Hawkman says he just teleported in. We can argue about this later, after we have him. The group moves out and Ray says that they were going to do their best, and Wally asks, what, with a magic lobotomy? But as Ollie tells him to take it easy, Kyle says that he has a point. They messed with someone's head, and Ollie looks back asking, what makes you think that it was the only time? As they all jump down, Ralph charges in first, but then he's blasted back, and out steps Deathstroke, telling everyone not to be surprised. The first rule of problem solving is to get a professional. Over in the Justice Society headquarters, Dr. Midnight begins his autopsy of Sue, but not long into it, he notices something. He contacts Oracle to see if she can get him in contact with Ralph, and she tells him that she can't reach Ralph right now. Why would he need to talk to them? He tells her that supposedly 2 days ago, Sue died from carbon monoxide poisoning, so her trachea should be black. And Oracle says that means her lungs are, and Dr. Midnight says they don't have a black spot on them. Ralph and everyone, they're going after the wrong person. She wasn't killed by Dr. Light. Back with Ralph and the others, Deathstroke calculates the battle. First, he sets off explosions, causing Wally to dodge them. And just as Wally appears, he holds his sword back right where Wally appears, stabbing him. Next, he moves and hits Zatanna in the stomach, causing her to vomit so she can't cast any spells. Hawkman then jumps into attack, but he already suspected that, and Deathstroke was prepared to have his sword cut him. Ollie then pulls back an arrow, but Deathstroke swings his staff, deflecting it, and then he swings with his sword. Ollie ducks, stating that he's too slow, and then he realizes that Deathstroke wasn't aiming for his head, he was aiming for his quiver. The moment he hears Diana's jaw click, Deathstroke turns and bags her head to stop her from screaming. With 2 left to fight against, Deathstroke then asks, where's Dr. Palmer? Oh, there he is! And he shines a pen laser. Using protons and electrons from the light, he blasts Dr. Palmer away. And knowing that he'll enlarge before anything can happen, he sends him flying straight into Hawkman. So, the only thing that's left at that point is Kyle Rayner, the Green Lantern. Kyle comes in swinging, but Deathstroke catches the hit and begins to crush his hand holding the ring, ready to pull it off. But before he can, Ollie jumps on his back, taking an arrow and stabbing it in Deathstroke's other eye. Ollie knows how much an arrow there can hurt, and he knows Deathstroke will lose his temper. Deathstroke jumps on Ollie, telling him that he'll kill him, and he begins beating on him. And that's when everyone jumps on Deathstroke at once. Dr. Light watches while Deathstroke struggles, but seeing them, he sees something. A flash of something in the past. He sees himself in the same position, and he realizes these people, they took his mind. Light begins to shine as Deathstroke and Dr. Light escape, and as it fades, the team sees something else. They see Clark. Clark asks them what happened, and why didn't they tell him that they were going after Dr. Light? Wally steps up stating, well, this was my idea. Ralph had a run-in with Dr. Light a few years ago, so we thought that he was trying to get revenge, and then we thought Ralph should be the one to bring him in. Clark tells him, I understand. So then he floats down to talk with the rest of the group, and Wally pulls Ollie aside, telling him, I did this for Barry and Hal, not you. You said before that there were others, but how many were there? Because I swear on Barry's grave that if you don't tell me the truth, I'll hand you over to Clark myself. Meanwhile, over in Ivytown, in the home of Jean Loring, ex-wife of Ray Palmer, a coffee mug breaks as Jean begs for them not to do this. She quickly tries to call out for Ray, but then she's blindfolded and then hung around her door, gasping to call for help. As the phone lay at her feet where she was trying to call Ray, he travels through the phone lines asking if she's okay. And as he jumps out of the receiver, he sees that this is not all right. He cuts the rope, hanging Jean, and before her body can fall, he catches her. Being a scientist, Ray isn't a religious person, but for the first time in a long time, he finds himself praying that she'll be okay. After giving her CPR, she begins to cough, and then she looks up stating, just like the old days. Hours later, everyone shows up to investigate the situation, and just like before, there's no traces of anything. Last time, they all investigated and found nothing, and then they all worked on their own, but this time they went straight to the top and brought in Clark. Clark looks at the knot on the noose. It's a bow line with a Dutch Marine twist, a common Boy Scout knot. And Ollie says, Boy Scout, right. And then he calls Oracle. Oracle reports that there's only one person who uses those, Slipknot, real name Christopher Weiss. He did some time with the Suicide Squad, that is until he tried to escape and they blew his arm off. He specialized in tying nooses around people's necks, and his specialty? A bowline knot with a Dutch Marine twist. Currently serving 5 to 10 for shoplifting of all things, and Clark turns back stating, I want someone talking to Slipknot now. But after a rather quick interrogation with Diana's lasso, they're back to square one with no leads. Clark mentions that they do have leads. Dr. Light and Slipknot were both in in the Suicide Squad, so they'll continue with that. Meanwhile, back in the Batcave, Bruce goes on with his own investigation, but he knows that it's not the squad. First rule of solving a crime: know who benefits. And who benefits from this? Over in Metropolis, Lois goes into work while another worker shows her a paper stating that Jean was attacked, asking the question, who's next? Lois continues on, just heading to her desk, but as she sits, she sees a letter addressed to her sitting there. She opens it and her eyes widen as she reads, "I know who your husband is. You're next." Each team on the Justice League continues beating down one villain after another, with everyone asking the same question: what do you know? Meanwhile though, over at Jean Loring's home, Ralph goes to check on his ex-wife to make sure everything's okay. She tells him she's fine, but the League needs him, especially now. He grows to full size, telling her, look, but she tells him, don't get mushy. I hate mushy. And Ray says with everything going on, he's just glad that she's okay. And Jean tells him, that counts as mushy. So they hug and she whispers that she heard him praying. It was really sweet. He looks away and she tells him that that's the part he was supposed to kiss her during. And soon, they'll change from divorcees back to lovers. Over in Gotham City, at the home of Tim and Jack Drake, Tim gets ready to go back out to investigate. Tim tells him to make sure that he doesn't open the door for anyone, but Jack stops him. He knows someone else is threatened. Who was it? Tim says that he can't tell him. He wants to, but he can't. Just know that it was someone really high up. Before leaving, Jack asks why doesn't he just stay here for the night? He worries about him. Tim's only 16, and Tim tells him that he thinks that they are kind of past that point. But does he honestly think that he should stay? Honestly? And Jack looks at Tim in his uniform and he tells him no, and he tells his son to go. After Tim leaves, Jack heads back downstairs where he finds a box, and he opens it, and he sees his name. But the R in Drake is circled like Robin's. When he opens the box, he sees a gun and a note stating, protect yourself. Without wasting time, Jack radios Oracle telling her something's going on. But during the call, he hears someone on the roof. Elsewhere, Tim is thanking Batman for picking him up, but over the radio, Oracle tells Tim to get back. It's his dad. Batman quickly turns the Batmobile around and he speeds back to the house. Over the radio, Jack tries to hide, but he hears someone kicking in the door to the house, making their way inside. And then through the doorway, he sees Digger Harkness, Captain Boomerang. Jack righties himself, and he jumps from the corner, firing the gun, unloading it into Digger's chest. But before falling down, he manages to throw one boomerang that hits Jack right in the chest. The two fall on their backs, and blood begins to spread between them. Once Tim arrives, he runs into the house, stripping away the Robin uniform, and when he enters the kitchen, he sees it. Batman rushes in, grabbing him, telling him, I've got you. Within hours, the police arrive, and while standing there, Bruce picks up the letter left by the gun, and he begins to examine it. As time goes on, everyone remembers the family members that they had lost. Brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, wives, husbands, and of course, mothers and fathers. Things that Bruce is all too familiar with after burying his own parents, then Dick's, and now Tim's. As the night begins to set in, Ollie watches from the rooftops and he sees what he thinks is Deathstroke. As he turns around, he sees that it's just his mask with the arrow he stabbed him with. Wally runs up stating that he's already gone, and then he says that it looks like Captain Boomerang really beat the crap out of them, huh? But as Ollie looks at him, he knows that that's not the reason he came here, and then he calls him out on it. Wally says it's nothing. When they fought Dr. Light and Deathstroke the other night, well, you said there were 7 of you, right? Ollie says so, and then Wally mentions that when Dr. Light went all supernova, the image he sent, there was Bruce there, as Batman, being the 8th. How come you didn't mention that before? Ollie doesn't say anything, but as Wally walks away, he tells him, you have to understand, this wasn't some schoolyard slap fight. After we voted to wipe Dr. Light's mind, that wasn't the only vote that we took. Wally begins to put it together and he says, wait, oh God, you took Bruce's memories? Ollie begins to explain. Right after Ralph took Sue to the hospital, Batman left to let everyone clean up as they normally do, but this time, because it was Sue, he came back. If you thought you had seen Bruce mad before, you had no idea. Batman tried to stop them, but Zatanna froze him. They were acting as a league within the league, and then they took a second vote. But this time, it was unanimous. The alternative would have been the destruction of the league. Wally tries to tell him that this is all wrong, and Ollie says, you haven't learned anything yet. Think about your own life. Everything that we've done to keep our secrets safe. We don't wear the masks just for ourselves, Wally. We wear them for our wives, our parents, and even one day our children. There are animals out there, and when it comes to family, you can't always be there to defend them, but the masks, they can. Elsewhere, as Bruce continues on his own investigations, he carries the note left for Jack Drake, and as he walks through a building, he comes across a room with a note, one for him. He returns to his lab, all the while Dr. Midnight is continuing his research on Sue Digby. Bruce knows that Sue died before the fire, but why? Everything was in place, nothing out of order. They have checked everything down to the last molecule. Oh no. While Dr. Midnight continues his research, he examines Sue's brain and he notices something that caused a block in her brain. And the closer he looks, he sees footprints. Over at Jean's house, Ray and Jean get ready for bed, but as Ray gets in the bed, Jean says that she's not sure that she likes the look in his eyes. And as he turns out the lights, he asks, "What look?" Once the lights go out, Jean asks if he's hitting on her, and he asks if it's working. And she tells him that she's seen better. And Ray says, "It's good to have you back, to have you safe." And Jean then asks, "Did you ever find out who wrote that protect yourself note for Jack?" And Ray tells her, "No." And then he stops and he thinks, and he turns the light on asking, "How did you know about the note?" She says that she saw it in the paper, and Ray tells her, "No, it wasn't there. Bruce took the note and it was never reported." And then it hits him. She did it. She sent the gun. Ray tells her to answer him, but she tells him, of course not. And then the pieces begin to fall together. She found his old costume in the basement, and that's why there's no physical evidence. It was all microscopic. Ray stops and he tells her, "Please, tell me you didn't kill Sue." And Jean remains silent for a moment, and then begins to cry, stating, "I didn't mean to. I just missed you. All I wanted was to knock her out. But when word got out that everyone would come running, Ralph to Sue, Clark to Lois, and just maybe you to me, I was worried that we might not have that spark anymore. But once you were here, it was just like the old days, wasn't it?" Ray looks at Jean and he tells her that she's insane. And Jean tells him, "I know how it looks, but it was an accident. I just had to call her. And before I knew it, Sue was on her knees calling for Ralph. I had shrunk down some other weapons just in case, but then I panicked. I didn't want to go to jail. So next I staged the hanging." But all the while that she talks, Ray thinks of the question that Bruce asked. Who benefits? She did. Jean benefited from all of this. And Ray shouts that Sue was their friend. Don't call this an accident. And then you hired Captain Boomerang and gave Tim's dad the gun? Jean says, don't go defending Captain Boomerang. He's killed far more people than that. Don't do this. I didn't think that he would die. Jean goes on telling him, "What are you gonna do now? Give me some big knockout punch to the jaw? Call the cops? I'm your wife!" But Ray knew exactly what to do as he walked away from Arkham Asylum. A week passes and no one hears from Ray since that day. Ollie and Wally sit and discuss the recent events, and Ollie mentions that Ralph went to see Jean to get closure. But she was so doped up that she kept playing with her hospital bracelet, calling it a wedding band. Through the silence, Ollie asks if he's still creeped out about them wiping Bruce's mind. And Wally says that they shouldn't. Ollie tells him, "Don't judge. I thought we had ruined things for years, but the League endures. That's what we're designed to do. We're designed to endure." In our epilogue, over in Opal City, the home of Ralph Digby, Ralph talks to someone in his cheery way. But through the house, there's trash building as beer bottles are piling up. Ralph goes on telling a joke to himself in the mirror. He was once told to talk to her. It would help. So every night he lays in bed, telling her about his day. And as he turns the light off, he tells her that he loves her too. This is Ralph and Sue Digby, husband and wife. Now, this is a classic and twisted story in the history of the Justice League, and it was one of the first stories to really show that there can be a darker side to the superhero world. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it's definitely not the ending you were hoping for, but it's definitely an ending. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this story, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comicstorian and Instagram at Comicstorian. I'll see you next time right here.